Here are 6 simple tips on how to improve your chess as a beginner. These tips are specific for people that are a beginner chess player, so anyone below maybe 14, 1500, that are stuck at the same elo and want to improve. These are tips from my own experience that helped me get past 1500, and they're also tips that are very specific and are a bit different from what you'll normally hear. Obviously, if you're looking for generic advice on how to improve chess, simple things like playing puzzles, playing a lot of practice games, analysing, reading books, taking courses, and doing all these things are useful, but it's quite generic advice. So I wanted to compile a list of small tips that will just help you improve your elo within a short space of time. So the first tip is playing in the morning, which seems like a very simple tip, but it helped me a lot when I started playing in the morning instead of the evening. A lot of people play chess in the evening, whether this is after work or even at night, and mentally we're much more tired then. We're just prone to play worse chess. So if you're actively playing and you want to practice chess, I highly recommend trying to play sometime in the morning, either when you first wake up before work or school or whatever, or even at lunchtime where your mind's a lot fresher. You're not only going to play just slightly better, but you're probably going to take in more information when you're analysing a game as well. So making that switch is very useful. Playing a lot of games at night on your phone probably isn't the best way to go about learning. I understand obviously everyone's schedule is different, so you might not get time to do that on the weekday, but then at least try and play in the morning on weekends. The second tip is to play rapid games instead of speed chess. So obviously when I say speed chess, I mean blitz and bullet. And while this can be good for some things like time management or pattern recognition, rapid chess is the most ideal to get the most out of your game from a learning experience. For me, rapid was enough time to actually think about the moves, think about the position, but wasn't as long as classical chess, where it probably ended up boring me playing lots of classical chess. So either playing something like a 10-0 or a 15-10 time increment is ideal for learning. I find 10-0 can get quite time on timing just because there's no increment, so 15-10 is a good solid amount of time to spend a good amount thinking about your opening, but also really analyse middle and end games, which you want to be doing a lot as a beginner because they're probably the hardest parts of the game. Obviously, if you're playing something like a 15-10 minute game, you're not going to be able to play loads in one day. So even just playing one a day and analysing that game, you're eventually going to get better. The reason why I still think it's important to play on a time increment and not play either classical chess or play against bots and don't use time is because obviously playing with a clock is part of the game, and time management is also a key skill you will need to learn on how to manage your time. And a simple way to break this down as a beginner is the 20-40-40 rule, where you spend 20% of your time on the opening, where moves probably flow a bit more natural, 40% of your time on the middle game, and 40% of the time on the end game, where most of your thoughts should be going. The third tip is to identify and work on your weaknesses. So everyone always tells you to analyse your games, but what are you actually doing when you're analysing? One of the easiest ways to analyse your games as a beginner and actually learn from it is to look at the eval bar and see when the game starts to go into the opponent's favour or when you start losing the game, whether that's by a sequence of moves or just one move, and learn from what you did there and learn what you should have done there instead. So this could be like blundering a piece, and you learn not to do that in the future, and you learn what the best move would have been in that position. And if you just do this simple analysing technique for each game, at least you can take one lesson away from each game. And if you do this constantly over a long period of time, you might find you're losing a lot of games for a particular weakness. Maybe you're losing against a particular opening, or maybe you're really struggling in end games, but you'll have the data there, so you know what you need to improve on outside of playing the game, whether that's looking at puzzles, taking courses, or just over analysing your games and looking at different positions. You want to find what your weaknesses are and try and improve them. And at the beginner level, you're probably going to be pretty weak on a lot of things in the game of chess, but try and find those small nuances to where you keep losing the game and try and improve on those. The fourth tip on how to get better is to master a few openings. So don't make the mistake of trying to learn loads of openings and learn all the proper moves and theory for those openings, because it's just a waste of time. Realistically, you just need to know key principles in openings, such as developing your pieces, controlling the centre, and casting your king. What I recommend doing is learning a few openings with white and black for the common themes. So for example, if you're playing black against white and white plays the king's pawn e4, you should have an idea of what you want to play against this and what kind of game you want to play. So Popular moves are obviously playing e5, create a more balanced game like the Italian, or you could play a Sicilian, which is a more aggressive defense. Either way, whichever one you want to play, try and play this a lot so you can learn all the moves from this. For example, if you're playing black against white and you transition into an Italian game, you know what the key features of this opening are, and you know the best ways to develop your pieces and try and get a good advantage going into the middle game. But also understand that you don't necessarily need to memorize every single move. You just need to know the key concepts to get you through the opening and try and get some sort of an advantage in the opening. The fifth tip, which is definitely only suitable at beginner level, try and predict your opponent's plan. So oftentimes when I do this myself, we get caught up in trying to make our own plan and spending most of the time focusing on our moves and our tactics and what we're doing with our pieces. We oftentimes overlook what the opponent's doing. And I think one thing you need to do as a beginner is always have a look why the opponent's moving the pieces, how they move. So obviously in the opening, it's going to be key concepts such as just trying to push the pawns into the centre and develop the pieces. But in the middle game, have a look at what they're doing, like where they're moving their knights, where they're going to put their queen, because this will tell you what they're planning on doing. I'm all for at beginner level creating aggressive attacks because I think that works well. But also, if you try and become a good defender by identifying your opponent's plans and playing against them, then I think you'll have an advantage at beginner level because most beginners just focus on their moves more than their opponents. And even if this equates to a more slower game of chess, where there's more moves because you're playing more defending moves instead of attacking moves, you'll probably win the game in the long run if you do that. So always keep an eye on your opponent's plan and what they're doing. And if they ever make a move and you're not sure what their plan is, then two things: either your opponent's just making a random move and they don't know what they're doing, or there's potentially a tactic on the board that you are missing. And the sixth tip and last tip for beginners is to always make sure you keep playing even when you're down material. The amount of times I've won a game at beginner level when I've been down literally a piece or a couple of pieces or a queen and I've still managed to win is hundreds, because at beginner level the games are so prone to go in either direction. If you're down, let's say a knight or a couple of pawns, you should 100% keep playing. This isn't enough material at beginner level where the game should be won, especially if it's a middle game and there's a lot of pieces on the board and the queens are on the board. You should definitely keep playing. Don't resign because of two things. One, there might be some good tactics in the position where you can win a piece back or even win the game. And two, even if you're losing the game, you need to have experience of what it's like to lose a game and how to turn a losing position into a winning position. There's no point every time you get into a really bad losing position just resigning the game because you're not building up the experience. And a lot in beginner level, but even up to higher levels of chess, games can turn around very quickly, especially if you're playing rapid games and your opponent's short on the timer, and there's all kinds of types of games where it could go back in your favour. I would even argue, even if you blunder your queen, you should carry on trying to play the game because you never know what's going to happen. And I've had games before where I've been down a queen, or maybe I've lost a queen for a knight, and I've ended up coming out on top. So I do think you should always carry on playing the game. And I think sometimes at beginner level, they're quick to just resign the game and start a new game because it's probably the easy thing to do. But if you really want to learn, and this is mainly for players that are maybe below 1,000 rated, you should definitely be doing this. Think of it as like a challenge when you're down a piece, and if you've lost a piece, then you could even sacrifice more material to try and get like a quick checkmate or something like that. But unless you're in some end game where it's going to be checkmate in 2 moves, always carry on playing. But thank you for watching the video, and I hope you learned something.